It's baffled scholars for 2 millennia. It is a puzzle made of multi-dimensional elements, an enigma with roots that reach back to the dawning of time, perhaps before. Daniel explained part of it. Ezekiel and Isaiah had glimpses into it. John saw it all, but was ordered to seal it up until the time of the end. That time is now. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert on a journey that spans the course of history. From Eden to Mount Hermon, from Hermon to Babel, from Babel to Rome, from Rome to the cross, and from there to us. Biblical prophecy is coming true before your eyes, and to understand it, you must discern the times both then and now. It's time to unravel the threads of this all-encompassing prophetic paradox. It's time to unravel Revelation.
The giants were on the earth in those days and also after that. Welcome to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we are excited to share what we've learned in the Gilbert House Fellowship with you. Over the last 5 years or so on our Gilbert House Fellowship podcast, we have been through the entire Bible. And as we studied the book of Revelation, we kept saying, everybody wants to know how to interpret these signs and the various, is this a metaphor? Is this literal? What does this mean? Who is this going to be? How do you solve the code? Well, we're going to try to help you do that. But the way we do it is different. We're not going to start with Revelation 1:1. We've been taking you back to the book of Genesis, because if you don't understand that end of it, if you don't understand the beginning, you won't understand why Christ has to come back and take care of things in the end.
Absolutely. And it may surprise you to learn that the giants who were referred to in Genesis chapter 6, the English Standard Version that we normally use, which calls them Nephilim, which is the Hebrew word, but that word often translated as giants in other English translations. These were not metaphorical giants. These were not allegorical giants. These are not fables, legends, myths. These were the mighty men who were of old. Now, was their stature that like that of the cedars? There's a reference in one of the books of the Old Testament that compares them to the Amorites, who were as tall as the cedars. I think that's figurative language. That's using poetic imagery to make a point. I don't doubt that these were taller than average humans. We've got some extra biblical texts from like Egypt that document the existence of really, really tall dudes in the land of Canaan during the time of the patriarchs. But I think more importantly is the nature of these beings and the corrupt religious practices they inspired, the occult religious practices that they inspired down through the time of the prophets and the apostles. And then if that being the case, it's not really a surprise once you establish that to see that their ultimate demise is prophesied in that end times, the great end times battle that we call Armageddon.
Exactly. The first 2 weeks of this program, we covered, in the beginning, God created, then we covered the fall of Adam and Eve. After that, they were kicked out of the garden. And I don't believe that we have access to it anymore. I think that it's probably all, extra dimensional.
Yeah, and that's a really good point to make, because there were some questions we received after the first program about, well, do you believe that this is in Jerusalem now? I think
only we can't see it.
Yes, in trying to summarize a rather dense academic paper in the span of about 2 minutes, I probably didn't make clear enough that what we're talking about is a cosmic Jerusalem, if you will. That when Moses wrote the book of Genesis, and he described the river, the stream flowing from Eden that split into 4 rivers, the Pishon, the Gihon, the Euphrates, and the Tigris, it was sort of a cosmic geography that he was describing. We can't go to Jerusalem today and find the remnant of the garden.
Exactly, because I believe at one time the earth, space-time continuum, was part of a greater landscape. We had access to more dimensions, you might say, and we've been cut off from those.
Yes.
So we can't see the throne of God anymore, but it is at Jerusalem.
Right, and cosmic geography is a term that we'll come back to as we go through this study, because the uttermost north, for example, which is a phrase in Ezekiel 38 and 39 that has led many commentators over the last 100 years to identify Russia as the land of Magog incorrectly, because they're missing that the reference is to a cosmic north, a spiritual or supernatural north, more than an actual place on a map.
Exactly.
And so it was with Eden.
Exactly. And in fact, people should read your book to get that. The Great Inception is a really good source material, I think.
Well, thank you.
You cover those cosmic mountains really, really well. After Adam and Eve were kicked out, they then started to have children.
Right.
She didn't sleep with anybody until after they were kicked out.
Yes.
So no Satan seed.
Right, exactly.
Serpent seed.
The Bible's very clear on that. Adam knew his wife, which is a euphemism, and she conceived, and that was Cain.
Yes.
So Cain and Abel, of course, had their confrontation.
Cain becomes the first murderer, and I would contend that Abel was a sacrifice. Cain was an agrarianist. He farmed. That's what he thought was the good offering to make. It's very likely, I believe, that there were spirits whispering into Cain's ear and telling him that that offering was going to be accepted. So he was surprised when it wasn't. And it also could be that these very same grain gods, fertility gods that were in his fields said, you know, you're going to do even better and we'll take care of you. But boy, we really are hungry. It would really help if we could just anoint the land with some blood, because the land, earth swallows up Abel's blood.
Right. It's difficult to understand, and we're not given a thorough explanation of it in the Bible.
No, we're really not. But I would say that there is room for that speculation. Certainly after that, Cain took off. He went toward the east, toward the land of Nod.
Yeah, which is the land of wandering.
Wandering, exactly.
Right.
So he was the first traveler.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
Bedouin.
Yeah.
He was the first murderer, and he became the first traveler.
Right.
And travelers are important when you start to study end times, because the book that we're writing, that's going to come out this probably late October, early November, is all about veneration of the dead, the Rephaim, the spirits of the giants.
Right. And that's a phrase that will be very important. And again, that connects it to end times prophecy.
Exactly, because we'll be getting to that when we study Revelation, Daniel, and Ezekiel.
So the incident at Babel, which will connect to Cain when we talk about that, because that's the third major rebellion. You know, the garden being the first one, the one we'll talk about today on Mount Hermon, and then the incident at Babel, which...
The incident at Babel.
Yeah, it sounds like a thriller, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? Yeah.
So we'll talk about that and how the location of Babel is connected to Cain. So there's some interesting linguistics and etymological connections.
I would argue that what was being attempted there was to reconnect with the other realms.
Yes.
The ones we'd lost.
Right.
To force the door.
I agree. And that location for the city of Eridu is really significant. But we'll get to that possibly next week.
Spoilers.
Yes, spoiler alerts. Of course, Genesis 6 is one of those weird sections of Scripture, and as our friend Dr. Michael Heiser
Ding, ding.
points out, if it's in the Bible and it's weird, it's important. Genesis 6, beginning in verse 1, when man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive.
Okay, stop there. Sons of God.
B'nai ha-Elohim. This is often taken to mean by Bible teachers, ever since the days of Augustine, really, in the 5th century, to mean human judges or the sons of Seth, who was the third son of Adam and Eve, and that the daughters of man were wicked. They were the daughters of Cain. Doesn't really make sense logically, spiritually, especially linguistically. When you look at the phrase B'nai ha-Elohim and compare it with the rest of the Old Testament and the way it's used, it always, underline always, means spiritual beings, the angelic realm. It does not ever mean anything but sons of God, the angels, the divine council.
These are what we call the watchers.
Right. And interestingly, the Septuagint translation, which is the translation that Jewish scholars about 200 years before the birth of Jesus took older Hebrew texts, which we no longer have access to.
Right.
They've been lost. But they translated older Hebrew texts into Greek because by the 3rd century BC, the 200 BC or thereabouts, most of the places where the Jews lived, Israel, Canaan, Lebanon, that area there, the Levant, had been controlled by Greek speakers since the time of Alexander the Great, who invaded the area around, I think, in the 330s BC. So they wanted the Jews who now spoke and read Greek to be able to still read the scriptures.
Well, and the Septuagint is valuable for two reasons. Not
Yes.
only because they had older manuscripts that we no longer have access to, but also because they understood the culture at the time.
Yeah.
So when they were looking at these to translate them, they put them, couched them in phrases that they knew. In
Right.
other words, they got it.
Yes.
We've lost that.
It's a window into the mind of religious Jewish scholars, Jewish religious scholars, a couple hundred years before Jesus.
Yes.
And the translation I'm reading from now is available from Logos Bible Software. It's the Lexham, so it's a more modern English translation of the Septuagint Greek. And they render Genesis 6, verse 2 this way. Instead of the sons of God, they say the angels of God, having seen the daughters of humans, that they were beautiful, took for themselves women from all whom they picked out. So they understood very clearly that this phrase, sons of God, really means angels. So that right there should put to rest, hopefully, I know it won't, but it should, put to rest the idea that these sons of God in Genesis 6 were somehow humans. They were not. Verse 3, then Yahweh said, then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. What does that mean specifically? We can debate that, but
It may mean from the point of that decree that it would be 120 years until
The
he
flood.
closed the doors and
Right.
the flood began.
or it may mean that God decided, okay, I'm going to shorten human lifespan so they no longer live 5,
Except
6,
that they
800
didn't
years.
only live 120 years after that.
No, it took a while before, it was after the days of Abraham
Yes.
that really...
Yes, that's how we would interpret that today, because if we had no genetic problems, our genes can actually replicate up to 145 years worth of times.
Before they can no longer...
Because then they get into the telomeres and you get into problems.
Okay. Well, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. This is verse 4. The Nephilim, or the giants, were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Now, this is the only details that we get about these mighty men who were of old.
In the Old Testament.
In the Old Testament. We get other hints as to their identities in the New Testament, specifically 2 Peter 2:4 and Jude verses 6 and 7. And it is pretty clear from the context that they're talking about, because this is the only incident in the Bible where we see angels sinning, except for Satan, of course, Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28. 2 Peter 2:4, well, Genesis 3. 2 Peter 2:4, for if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell, and that word translated hell is actually the Greek tartarau, which means thrust them down to Tartarus, which according to, in the Greek mind, which Peter would have been familiar with, because again, they were still living in a Hellenized world, that the place called Tartarus was separate from Hades. It was a special place reserved for supernatural threats.
As far below the earth as...
The earth below heaven, right. There was one of the poets, Hesiod, I think, who wrote that you could take a bronze anvil and it would take 8 days to drop from heaven to earth and another 8 days to drop from earth to Tartarus. So...
we'll try that out.
Cast them into Tartarus and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment. And when you read the rest of that section of Scripture, if he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly, and if by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly. And continuing on, you read that section of 2 Peter, and he connects it to sexual immorality. So it's clear what type of sin these angels committed. Jude makes it even more explicit.
And you could make the argument that the main sin in Sodom and Gomorrah was going after strange flesh, angel flesh.
Exactly. Crossing the species barrier, not same-sex attraction.
Although that was being practiced as well.
Right.
It was primarily that interaction that was a repeat
Exactly.
of Genesis 6.
And Jude makes this clear, verse 6 of Jude's epistle. And the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, or kept not their first estate in the King James, but left their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness and judgment until the great day. That's the day of the Lord, Armageddon. Just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities, which likewise indulged in sexual immorality. That was the sin.
Likewise.
Yes.
In the
And
same way.
pursued unnatural desire or different flesh, strange flesh, serve as an example by undergoing punishment of eternal fire. That's the point there. Jude, Peter, reconfirming what we read in Genesis. The book of Enoch expands on this. Book of Enoch, first Enoch actually.
Let's take a break and then come back and do the Enoch reading.
Right.
How about that?
And that kind of expands a little bit as to what happened, where it happened, and what we know about it. But this is what the apostles would have known too. And then we'll connect this before we wrap today. We're going to have to move quickly, but we will connect it to the end times as Unraveling Revelation continues after this.
When did the government alien programs originate and why? Who were the Collins elite, and were they exposing the dangers of such programs? What exactly did these black projects involve? Learn the astonishing answers to those questions and so much more. Skywatch TV is proud to announce the Higher Entities Ultra Collection. This special offer includes the new Fall Brothers feature film, Higher Entities, The Lost Tapes, which is a live-action documentary including up-close and personal discussions with former FBI agents, Department of Defense consultants, best-selling authors, and seasoned research professionals that deliver intimate testimonies of disclosure, which put you face-to-face on location and in the conversation, featuring Justin Fall, Dr. Thomas Horn, Ray Boucher, Derek Gilbert, Stan Dale, Darren Geisinger, Chad Riley, and Wes Fall. But that's not all. You'll also receive the top-secret 5-volume DVD collection, Project Stargate. This unprecedented series of never-before-released confidential interviews features 12 of the world's leading authorities on UFOs, so-called aliens, gods, and the coming day of contact. You'll be amazed as we go behind the scenes to ask experts what they really believe is coming. Watch as men with security clearances like the late Dr. Chuck Missler share for the first time what they know. Then take notes as Dr. Michael Heiser, the late Chris Putnam, Russ Dizdar, Joe Jordan, L.A. Marzulli, Daryl Sims, Gary Stearman, Joyce Aarons, and others as they weigh in on what will soon cause the world to stand still in awe. Project Stargate holds a retail value all by itself of $150, included now for a limited time in the Higher Entities Ultra Collection. Sold separately, this Ultra Collection holds a retail value of $175. Yours now for your donation of only $35 plus shipping and handling. So take advantage of this incredible offer now and receive all 5 Project Stargate DVDs along with the new Higher Entities documentary for your donation of only $35 plus shipping and handling. Now at the Skywatch TV store. Order the Higher Entities Ultra Collection online or call 1-844-750-4985.
Welcome back to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we are talking about the angels who sinned.
Yes. The Book of Enoch, first Enoch actually, was well known in the ancient world. Jewish religious scholars knew this.
I happen to have a copy right here.
Oh, why do you happen to have a copy of the Book of Enoch?
I happen to have
there?
a copy because if you like our Facebook page, Unraveling Revelation, you'll be automatically entered in our weekly drawing. And the past couple of weeks, we've given away a free copy of your book, The Great Inception. But this week, we're going to give away a free copy, this hardback edition of First Enoch. It's a $14.95 sale item. It's normally $19.95 in the Skywatch TV store. So if you really just want to buy one, you can. But why not? Enter and get a free one, or at least be enrolled. So one lucky person will get drawn a week from Monday, a week from today, and you will be the winner.
Yes.
And get this book. So
well, it is helpful to expand on what we know from the little clues that we get salted throughout Scripture. Genesis 6, 2 Peter, Jude 6 and 7. I would also add 1 Peter 3, verses 19, 20, where Jesus proclaimed to the spirits in prison.
Yes.
All of that's connected to the same event, the sin of the watchers, in Genesis 6. First Enoch chapter 6 expands on this. When the sons of men had multiplied in those days, beautiful and comely daughters were born to them, and the watchers, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. And they said to one another, "Come, let us choose for ourselves wives from the daughter of men, and let us beget children for ourselves." And Shemaiah, their chief, said to them, "I fear that you will not want to do this deed, and I alone shall be guilty of a great sin." And they all answered him and said, "Let us all swear an oath, and let us all bind one another with a curse, that none of us turn back from this counsel until we fulfill it and do this deed." And they all swore together and bound one another with a curse. And they were, all of them, 200, who descended in the days of Jared onto the peak of Mount Hermon. And they called the mountain Hermon because they swore and bound one another with a curse on it. Interestingly, a Canaanite text from the ancient Amorite kingdom of Ugarit calls a character, Daniel, who, by the way, is the name of one of these watchers in the book of Enoch.
Not the Daniel from the book of Daniel.
Not the book of Daniel from the book of Daniel.
Same name, different guy.
Same name. A man of Hermon, or Hernum, or the Hernamite. It's possible that that was the original name of the mountain, and that the Hebrews, playing
Switched
with language the way they did,
Which they often did.
because the name Hermon comes from the same root as Karem, which means devoted to destruction.
Yes.
In other words, this is so sacred, if you touch it, you have to die. So that was and there's some other aspects of this, and the name Jared, the days of Jared, but we don't have time to get into that. But the consequences of this, according to the book of Genesis, is that wickedness was rampant on the earth. God sent the flood and destroyed these entities.
Can I back up for a minute? You said something that some of our viewers may have a question. When you said harem means so sacred, if you touch it, you will die. There's nothing sacred about Mount Hermon, except that God created it.
Right. It's difficult.
It's used in the Old Testament of things that you're not allowed to take with you.
Right.
The Lord does not want you to have these things. They are evil in His sight because they've been used for pagan rituals.
Devoted to destruction.
They are harem.
Right, devoted to destruction. It's a difficult concept to put into English.
It
but
is.
Right, that's a better way of explaining it, because we see the Hebrew word used mostly in the book of Joshua, chapters 10 and 11 especially, when they're on the conquest of Canaan, where they devote the cities of the Amorites to destruction. In fact, that brought judgment when one of their men took some stuff from Jericho that he wasn't supposed to keep, some gold and silver and a cloak, and they had to be destroyed because they were harem. So that's the sense of Mount Hermon, devoted to destruction. The destruction of the Nephilim, the giants, caused another problem on earth, and God decreed that the spirits of heaven, in heaven is their dwelling. This is in 1 Enoch chapter 15. But now the giants who were begotten by the spirits in flesh, they will call them evil spirits on the earth, for their dwelling will be on the earth. In other words, this is the origin of demons.
Yes, when the flood came, it destroyed their physical bodies, but their spirits, and we're not really sure how they got spirits in them. They didn't come from God.
No. But these were hybrid creatures that were never supposed to be, and while the watchers were spirit and could not be physically destroyed, they were condemned to the pit. These spirits of these hybrid creatures, the spirits of the giants, lead astray, do violence, make desolate, and attack and wrestle and hurl upon the earth and cause illnesses. They eat nothing but abstain from food and are thirsty and smite. These spirits will rise up against the sons of men and against the women, for they have come forth from them. And it basically says they will make desolate until the day of the consummation of the great judgment.
The zombie apocalypse.
Essentially, yes. Demons will plague humanity until the judgment, and that's where we get to the connection to the end times. This is something that I explain in much more detail, of course, in the book Last Clash of the Titans, and we're going into this in even more detail in the book Veneration, forthcoming from Defender Publishing. The key there is the word traveler that you used for Cain early on. These spirits were venerated by the Canaanites, the Amorites, who called them Rephaim. They summoned them through necromancy ritual, and they were described as travelers in the sense that they travel from one plane of existence to another. They crossed over, like the Greeks had to cross over the river Styx to get. Well, these spirits would cross over, and there was a place known in the ancient world, apparently, that were where the Israelites traveled during the Exodus, that were known as the place where the demons would cross over. In fact, the mountain that Moses climbed to get his only look at the Holy Land, Mount Nebo, is called by God in the book of Deuteronomy this mountain of the Avarim, this mountain of the travelers. Well, that is the very place where Ezekiel places the conflict, the final conflict, the war of Gog and Magog, for God's holy mountain, his Har Moed, Armageddon in the book of Revelation. And the hordes of Magog will fall. This is in Ezekiel 39, verse 11, and I'm hoping I can bring this up quickly.
So you're saying that they're going to come down from their current domain?
From the cosmic north, because that uttermost north, the phrase in Hebrew is Yarkatei Tsephon. Mount Tsephon was known in the ancient world as the mountain that was sacred to Baal, the storm god, whom Jesus identified in the New Testament as Satan. His commander-in-chief, Gog, or the Antichrist,
who is a spirit being.
Who is a spirit being, yes, not Vladimir Putin, will lead the armies of Magog from cosmic north. Again, basically, Ezekiel, when you read it correctly, you understand that he was saying the whole world was coming together against Israel. And that's consistent with apocalyptic
from all 4
prophecies.
points of the compass.
Right. Zechariah 12, Zechariah 14, Joel chapter 3, basically say that the whole world is coming against Israel. And then Ezekiel says, on that day, the day of the Lord, Armageddon, I will give to Gog a place for burial in Israel, the valley of the travelers east of the sea. That's the plains of Moab, across from Jericho, at the north end of the Dead Sea. It will block the travelers, for there Gog and all his multitude will be buried. It will be called the Valley of Hemon Gog, or the multitude of Gog. What does it mean to block the travelers? My theory is this, and I think you agree. When we are resurrected into glorified bodies, 1 Corinthians 15, these entities, like the ones that Jesus proclaimed to in the pit in 1 Peter 3, hey, I'm getting out of here. I'm being raised up, resurrected into a glorified body, but you're still dead.
Exactly.
I think that's what happens here in Ezekiel 39. These travelers, these demons who will inhabit the soldiers marching to do battle against God himself, will be blocked.
Yes.
All of these people will be resurrected, the faithful, but you, travelers, Rephaim, this is your ultimate destruction.
Wow.
There are other prophecies, we'll talk about that, but again, we spell it out in much more detail in the forthcoming book. But this is why the giants of Genesis 6, they have a role to play at Armageddon. We can only do so much with this in 28 minutes and 30 seconds, but we hope this kind of whets your appetite for why we believe end times prophecy is scattered throughout the entire Bible, and why we're so excited about doing this program every week, because it's encouraging.
It really is, and we've heard back from many of you saying that you find it encouraging, so thank you.
And we thank you for watching. With Sharon Gilbert, I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV.